Welcome to the Stay-at-Home Nurse Podcast. I'm your host, Deanna Cooper Gillingham, bedside nurse turned lifestyle entrepreneur. I started my career as a nurse in 1994 and worked in a variety of settings, eventually landing a dream job as a work-from-home case manager. But it still did not give me the freedom and flexibility I desired. So in 2014, I created a side hustle that turned into a multi-six-figure lifestyle business, allowing me to leave my job and move to the Caribbean in 2016. I haven't looked back since. I now travel the world while running my business. I have fulfillment, freedom, flexibility, and fun. I want the same for you. This podcast is here to inspire and equip you to live your best life. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Stay-at-Home Nurse Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Andrea Bossel, and Andrea is with the Remote Nurse Connection. She's going to share with us today tips on how to not get scammed looking for a remote nursing job. That is one of the problems that are out there today, is there are so many scams, and we don't want you to be afraid of getting that remote nursing job, moving away from the bedside. And so we want to give you some tips to look for to make sure that you are confident that the job that the person you're talking to and the job that you're going to is a legitimate job. So first of all, Andrea, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm really excited about this because we have a Facebook group, and in our Facebook group, we at one time allowed people to post jobs and recruiters. And at the time, I had an assistant who had an HR background, and she was alerting me to some of the problems that she was seeing with the jobs that were being listed. And we made a decision that unless we can vet them, like if we can actually get on a Zoom call with them and make sure that they're legit and that it's safe for our nurses and our case managers to apply for these jobs, that we would not allow any more in there just because of that. And I hate that because it's like, I know people are looking for case managers and case managers are looking for jobs, but it's a lot of work to try to vet these companies. So that's a decision we had to make. And I was talking to you recently, and you were telling me that you actually do a lot of vetting on the jobs that come up on that you place. So I'd like to hear a little bit about what you do and how, what are some tips that our nurses can take? I guess we should start with, what are red flags? What is something that you would say, oh, wow, I need to really look into this one a little bit better?
What are red flags? So there are a few things to look for, but I always try to think of it as like a clinical picture. You put the whole pieces of the pie together. So some things isolated, could raise some red flags that you can kind of validate. But when you put the whole picture together, if none of that really looks good, it's probably not a legitimate job. A lot of the things that I've seen nurses post in my Facebook group that they're asking about are related to recruiters. And like you said in your Facebook group, like, are they legitimate? Are they with legitimate companies? One of the first things that I always say you can do is look up all of their social media accounts. Legitimate companies and recruiters are going to have usually a presence on LinkedIn, and they're going to have posts on there, and they're going to have followers, and they're going to have a lot of engagement that goes on in LinkedIn because it's a professional social media platform. Facebook is another good one for businesses that they're usually on. So it's another place. You might not find recruiters as much on there, but you should see a presence for a business page on Facebook. Social media presence, looking for not just followers, because they can buy followers on LinkedIn and Facebook. So you really want to look for engagement on their posts. Are there, photos of their employees that they post from conferences and meetings and that kind of thing? You'll see that a lot with the companies, legitimate companies, and with recruiters. Look up their reviews on the Better Business Bureau website. A lot of times you can find some good information on there. For job postings, you might see grammatical errors in there, which can kind of be a red flag. Not always. Sometimes these are templates that they're using to post the job descriptions. So you might see in there, but kind of put the picture together with the rest of things that are going on. So grammatical errors is something to look into. Let's see. If they want to interview by email or text, that's a pretty big red flag. So some companies have the interview where they can do pre-recorded interviews, which is legit for some companies, but doing a full email interview or text on WhatsApp interview and then sending you a job offer is not usually a good thing. So you might want to walk away from that. A lot of times they'll try to do something like, I'll send you a check for you to cash to get your equipment started. That's not something legitimate companies. They'll either send you equipment. There's usually a lot of red flags that if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah. The check one, I think, is a red flag for a lot of people. I've seen that in my Facebook group also, where people are saying they say they're going to send me a check so I can buy my equipment. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that is a red flag. And I know people think, well, they're sending me the money, so how is that a red flag? But from what I understand, they'll do something where they send you the check and then they say they send you too much and they want you to reimburse, or they want you to buy from their store and the check is going to reimburse them.
Excuses of something.
Yeah.
The goal is to get money back out from you, not to give you money. It's usually a check that's going to bounce. So
Yes. And it'll look like it's in your bank account, but then it's not. And so you think that you're safe, like, oh, I've got the money and now I can go and buy from this store that they tell you have to buy from, which why wouldn't they just buy it from there? Because I've worked for companies, and every company that I worked for remotely always sent equipment. They always sent it from their distributor. So yeah, that is a big red flag. Is it just remote jobs that are having this, or are there other jobs that people are trying to scam with?
So I usually just look remote hybrid or sometimes with travel with the biotech jobs, but anybody can post a job on Indeed or LinkedIn. Like, it's not a vetted process. So they have things in place where people can upgrade and do different things with their company profile and that kind of thing. So anybody can go post a job on Indeed. And so there are options to scam people locally too, not just remote jobs.
So that's good to know. I think a lot of people felt safe on Indeed, like, oh, it has to be legit because it's on Indeed. But you're saying that that's not the case. Anybody can post a job on there.
From what I've read, that anybody can post a job on there. They have different levels where you can upgrade and then, pay for their services for collecting applications and that kind of thing. But you can post on there and create a company profile. I think they do a good job of trying to take them down and people report them, but you might find it before somebody else has a chance to report it, and then they got your information on there. So I always recommend applying directly on the company careers page. Most companies will have a careers page that they accept applications on. Some of the smaller companies might not, and that's kind of where you can go down some rabbit holes to make sure it's a legitimate company. And even then, I would recommend reaching out on their contact form on their website.
So if you reached out on the contact form, let's say somebody reached out to you about an offer, or you applied for an offer, and it looks like they're starting to ask the information that you don't want to share, like your address, your phone number, I think a big red flag is your social security number. You don't necessarily want to share that unless you know you have a job offer. So if they're doing that, you said recommend going to the contact page. Would you ask them, are they hiring? If this person that you're contacting with is an employee, what would you do when you went to the contact page?
You want to look at the domain name of their email. So where is that email coming from? And sometimes the larger companies will put on their careers page, like, beware for phishing scams, and they'll tell you the actual full email address to look for where their verified recruiters are contacting you from that domain email. And so that means that's coming from that company, and they can make them creative by putting one character different, or, putting a dot in between. So you really have to look at where is the email coming from, because they'll get very creative and make it where it looks very easily to miss, to look at what the domain email to make sure it's legitimate. Yeah. So I would look at their contact page. If they're a bigger company, like I said, they'll usually have that on there. If they're a smaller company, you might have to go find out what state they're licensed in, look up their information that way, and make sure they actually have a verified LLC or corporation or whatever kind of business they are. Look for a phone number. I mean, I would do all that, but so if you're looking at it, it feels like, is it worth it? But it is if someone gets your information. Like, if that's a job that you really want, they shouldn't make it that hard to prove that they're a legitimate company. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I hear you. I think that's the barriers that a lot of nurses have to sending out all these applications and applying for these jobs, is that if it's a company that they've heard of and they're just going on like United Healthcare's page, right, then they're feeling pretty safe. But if they're going out of there, then they're not. And the other day, I actually got a text message that said, oh, we received your resume and you look like the perfect hire. We'd like to move forward. And I'm like, I never sent a resume, but I could see how somebody who was sending out, I hear these nurses saying that they're sending out 100 resumes. Wow. And I can see where if I just sent out 100 resumes and somebody just sent me that text message, I would feel like it was legit because I did just send out, and they're catching you off guard. It's kind of like a spray and pray where they just spray 10,000 text messages out there. And the ones that actually did apply for a job are going to reach back out to them thinking that it's legit.
Yeah, it happens. I mean, it's one of the reasons too, I always say to kind of narrow in what you want and don't do the spray and pray like application method for your remote nursing jobs because you really want to keep track of where you applied to. So if you do get a response back, like, what company I applied to, what job it is, and it kind of gives you a little bit more, um, leg to stand on as far as like, who are you and where are you calling me from? And you'll kind of know, did I apply there or did I not? So if you're just kind of sending out a lot of random resumes on Indeed, that makes it a little difficult for you to keep track of everything too. And you really don't, applying directly on the company website when it's possible gives you a better chance of getting through someone because they don't download every single resume off of Indeed or LinkedIn either. You might get lost in the shuffle in there. They might not. I think one of the ways that they do it is they can charge by how many they can download, how many applications they can download from Indeed. So you might not be one. That's one of the reasons they have some screening questions on there sometimes too. And if you don't answer that the way that they want you to, then they're not even going to download your resume anyway. You have a better chance skipping that, just finding the job on Indeed and then going out and finding the actual company page and careers page and link. And that's one of the things that I do for the members. Well, you have access to it on the free job board, but I go in and I find all of the company career pages and the direct job links, and I put them along with the Indeed or LinkedIn job post if that's where I find the job at, so that you don't have to go out and do all that searching.
Oh, that sounds like it's very convenient.
It makes it pretty easy. One of the nurses posted just like last week, she was like, when I found that, I was able to apply to 20 jobs in 2 hours because all the information was like right there that I needed. I didn't have to go out and go search for the careers page. The job link was there. And one of the reasons I always tell people it's good to have the Indeed or LinkedIn job link is because the companies will take those job postings down once they get enough applicants, and then you don't have a copy of the job unless you've cut and pasted it into a Word document. You need that sometimes to prep for interviews. So having that Indeed or LinkedIn link is another good way for you to prep for your interviews. And then I've already done the legwork for you and given you the link to the company careers pages, so it makes it a lot faster to find what you're looking for and then get the application in quickly.
That's impressive. And I hear that getting the application in quickly is also important because sometimes they'll take the first 100 applicants, even though they might have 1,000 applicants. And I see people saying all the time, I've put in 100 applications and I never got any information. Well, nobody might have even looked at it. They might take the first 100 and say, we're going to look at these first. And if we don't get anybody, then we'll look at the next 100. Because it's a lot of work hiring, and they're getting so many applications that they're not necessarily looking at every single one of them when they make a decision. So being able to quickly put your resume in there is definitely a plus. It sounds like there's a lot of work that you do to make sure that these are legit and that people have what they need. I like what you're saying about having a spreadsheet and really looking for what you're looking for, not just posting to every single remote job out there. It makes it hard, I think, when you're applying for every single remote job. It makes it hard for you to stand out and look like you are a good candidate for one particular job.
Yeah. If you can kind of narrow in on a category, it'd make it quicker for you and have like draft resumes. But yeah, the kind of like what you said, the spray and pray method can make it really hard to stand out because someone else might be taking the time to make that stand out for like a case management job versus a data abstraction job. And so they're going to go with someone who made themselves stand out, right? To look like they're a case manager resume versus a data abstraction resume. So kind of narrowing in on a certain category can definitely help. And that way you're not spending as much time every time customizing the resume over and over again to get your application in quickly. But you do need to get it in quickly, especially for the bigger insurance companies, because I see their job posting close within 24 hours a lot of times.
Wow. So if you're working that day at 12-hour shifts,
Yeah,
it's kind of hard. Oh, I feel bad because it's sad that if you don't, but that's it. It's very competitive right now.
The pediatric and like maternity or women's health, a neonatal type area, those are the ones I see close most quickly. Some of the other more general job postings on the insurance companies will stay up a little bit longer. But if you are looking for something very niche down like that, they do close pretty fast.
That's good to know. And I'm thinking the advice that you mentioned about keeping a track of all of the places that you've applied and your spreadsheets could even help to, if somebody does contact you, like the text message I got the other day, you could ask them specifically, where are you from and what date did I apply? Because now that you applied for that job on that date, and you can kind of cross-reference to see that they actually get your resume, or is it somebody just scamming?
Yes, exactly. I have a tracker, couple trackers, different options in my membership that I give them. So it's one of the reasons too, is just to help keep you organized. It looks good on your part whenever the recruiter calls and you know exactly what job you applied to, because you might apply for 50 jobs, at one insurance company. So if you can kind of go down that list and you know what job title you put in and which company it is, it does look better on your part, not just to help weed out scams, but it also makes you look better and more organized in that recruiter's eyes. That like, oh, they really know, because they know we're applying to like lots, they know that nurses are applying to 50 plus jobs at one company. So it does. And that's another way to help you stand out, is that like, oh, well, they really do want this job. They know exactly what I'm talking about when I call them. And it also, like you said, helps with scammers, because they're going to try to get information out of you because they don't know what you've applied to. They're going to be very vague in general. And they're not going to be able to answer those specifics, like you said.
And, coming from the end of somebody who is hiring people, if I'm hiring people, I will put very specific things that I want them to do, because I want to know that your attention to detail, you read the instructions and you follow instructions. And when you're working at a distance from people, your boss can't see you. They don't know what you're doing. They don't know if you're disorganized with stuff all over your desk and you can't find anything. And I think that's one of the things with these work from home jobs. They expect you to be able to do things and be organized. And just showing that you know exactly what job it is that you applied for can show that you are organized and detail oriented and that you actually know what you're talking about. Also, I've talked to a lot of hiring managers, and they don't want to just hire somebody who wants a remote job. They want somebody who wants that specific job, whether it's HEDIS, whether it's data abstraction, whether it's utilization management, case management. They want somebody who actually says, this is where I feel like I'm a good fit, because they have all hired people that don't work out. After 3 months, 6 months, a year, they're like, I hate this. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. And now they just spent all this time and money training you, and you're leaving the team. And nothing looks worse than saying, well, I applied for 100 jobs. Which one is this? Because then right there, they know she doesn't want to work for our company. She doesn't feel like she's aligned with our company. She just wants to get away from the bedside. And they want somebody who's attracted to them, not somebody who's running from something else.
Right.
So it sounds like you have a nice way of helping the nurses to actually stay organized, so that they can show that they are organized and they do know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's the feedback that I got too when I was transitioning into another remote role. And I asked for feedback later, like, what was it about me that you wanted to hire me in this particular role? Because I didn't have any direct experience in what I was doing in that. And it was one of the number one things was, we knew that you were coachable by you showing that you had organizational skills and time management skills. And we could see that from the very beginning of the application process with you. And it, reflects in your work and how they expect you to be able to keep up with things when they're coaching you and teaching you. Like you said, they're spending all that time training you. They don't want you to leave. So they want to make sure that it's a good fit. So if you can go through and you seem organized and you know how to speak to that specific job category or role that you want to do a career transition into, they're much more likely to want to hire you and train you.
Yes. And that is, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is one of the biggest things. It was the same thing when I got hired. I had no experience when I got my first case management job. And when I asked her, why do you want to hire me? Because I have no experience. I don't even know what case management is. She told me, I can tell by talking to you that you're coachable and trainable, and that you have the qualities that are needed for case management. And I can train you. And I want to bring that up because there are a lot of Facebook groups and pages out there for work from home jobs. There are also a lot of people hiring that are in these groups, and they will search you.
Oh, yes. I've noticed that.
Yeah. And when you say, I've seen people put in a group where they'll say, hey, I am actually a hiring manager, and here's some tips I have for you. And people will argue with them. Oh, you shouldn't do that. I'm like, you just showed that you're not trainable and coachable. Now, anybody who searches your name in this group is going to, and they say, I've put in hundreds of applications. And I'm like, well, anybody who searches, they will, all the things that Andrea is saying to do about go on social media, look them up, they will do the same thing for you. And especially a smaller company that really, they're not hiring hundreds of people at a time, make sure that they're hiring the right people. And they're looking at your social media presence. And when you're showing them right there that you're not coachable, instead of saying, wow, thank you for that information, I'm going to use that for the next applications that I put in, and instead you're arguing with them and saying, well, you shouldn't do it that way. They're like, I'm not going to hire you, and I'm going to try to train you, and you're going to say, well, you shouldn't do it that way. Like, think about the things that you say in public places like social media. And I know people say, well, I don't use my real name, or people can figure things out, and you'd be surprised who knows who, and they can tell by who you're friends with. It's figure outable, and you need to be very careful.
True. I mean, it's kind of what I do is like what you said, it's in reverse. So you would be surprised all the things that you can piece together, the information from their address, their LinkedIn page, their Facebook page. Like there's a lot of things that you don't realize are discoverable and cross-referenceable if you know how to use internet to search.
Yes.
Those queries to search, that a lot of things are discoverable that you might not have thought that they were. So
exactly.
First, it's the same thing. You're exactly right.
So just a tip, like everything that you do is a reflection of who you are. And you want to apply for jobs and companies where you are a good fit. It's like, just because it's a remote job does not mean it's going to be a good fit. Like the company culture matters. And there's a lot of things that go into that matter also.
A lot of work, applying for these jobs too. So I'm sure someone doesn't want to waste their time getting in a job and find out 3 months later they don't like it and they got to go through the whole process all over again. That's
Absolutely. And now they have on the record that they've only worked for 3 months, which could be a red flag. Could or could not, because it's not always a bad thing. But again, yeah. So that's actually why we have and I think, we have our career options webinar that we do with case management and utilization management. And that's exactly the reason why, because they're such different jobs. And one is very much for the nurses who enjoy watching their patients make the changes. They want to coach them through these changes. They want to teach them how to advocate for themselves. It's very different than utilization management, which is you look at a bunch of information and you make a decision. There's no patient interaction. And usually nurses will love one and hate the other. And we don't want you to apply for a job and quit your job and start working for this other company and actually hate it every day. And yes, you can hate work from home jobs.
You can.
Because I've heard people say, I wouldn't care what I had to do as long as I could work from home. And it's like, there are jobs that you can hate that you could work from home. So we want you to be set up with the job that is the perfect fit for you, with the employer that is the perfect fit for you. And that's always our goal. So we talked a lot about the things that they should be looking for. And I just want to clarify one thing. One of the problems is getting your social security number. People will use it for identity theft. So they ask you questions that they can use. And maybe they ask you to go and log in somewhere and create a password. And if that's the same password you use for everything, and you give them their email address, you give them things, like social security numbers. So you do need to be very careful. It's not to say that you should not apply for remote jobs unless they're directly on the site, but there are some things that you can do to protect yourself. And I think Andrea did a very good job of explaining what those are. But Andrea, I want you to talk about now, how did you get into helping other nurses get remote jobs? Let's start there, and then we'll move into what you actually do.
I wish there's like an easy answer, like, oh, that just happened. But it was just one of the things that just from early on in my career, starting out in like informatics and then being exposed to a lot of nurses who did a lot of non-traditional type roles. And it's just over the years, I just kind of became a person with my network of nurses that they would reach out and ask me, do you know about this job, or do you know about this kind of job or this kind of role? Because I had worked with so many of them early on in different areas. When you work in informatics as a liaison, you have your hat and your hand in many different pots, within the implementation process in a hospital. And so I had met a lot of these nurses and had interacted with a lot of them. And so I knew about firsthand, like, oh, this is what I've heard from this person that likes doing travel jobs for informatics or that kind of thing. And so that kind of led into remote nursing later on for myself, that I just wanted a job that I could just take with me anywhere. So I did travel nursing a lot and had a lot of flexibility, but that comes with not being sustainable over time for a long time once you do it, dealing with housing and moving and that kind of thing. So I just kind of noticed within my network, I was usually a person that all of my friends, not even just nurses, but other friends would reach out to and ask about resume tips and interview tips and where do you find these jobs? And it became a lot easier, after 2020 to find remote nursing jobs because a lot of them added the filters for remote or hybrid. But that's when I noticed the scams starting to come up a lot more. on Indeed and in LinkedIn. And so you kind of had to shift how I was searching for them and how I was vetting them. And it just kind of happened. A lot of my nurses that I knew wanted help getting remote jobs, and they would come to me for help. And that's just kind of how it got started.
So that's how it got started. For the listener, what exactly do you do now, and how do you help nurses to find the right jobs for them?
It started with me just creating a website for a job board. Started in a Facebook group doing job postings, and then I turned it into a website and a job board, and it still is a job board. It's free. They can come. And my goal with the website, with the job board, was to make it easy for people to narrow in what they want, because sometimes the job descriptions are really unclear, or they're not used to looking at the requirements and being able to determine, like, is this a job that I can apply for as a bedside nurse without having any direct experience? Like, is this role one that's good for me to apply for, that they're willing to train me? And so I started adding a lot of those filters in and just looking at the jobs and making it easily for them to search and find what they're looking for. So nurses who are looking for pediatric jobs or entry-level jobs or biotech jobs, like I wanted to add all those filters in for them to easily be able to, like, just narrow in quickly what you want, because there's so many on LinkedIn and Indeed that aren't specific for, like, remote nursing. And it kind of takes a nurse looking at these job descriptions to be able to interpret sometimes what are they looking for. So that was my goal with the website, with the job board. And then nurses really needed a lot of help with, like you said, filtering through scams, making sure that they're not applying to things that are scams. And so that's one of the things I do with all the jobs, is I vet all of them before I put them on there. They're all looked at by me, and, you know, all the filters are kind of added by me, so that there's a nurse looking at that job, making sure that, you know, I do the best I can to make sure that nobody's going to get one of those scammy job posts from Indeed going up on there. And then nurses needed help with resume to get past all of the software that companies use now to collect the resumes. So that's another big piece inside the membership, is a lot of the strategies and resume writing tips that I've learned along the way to make that process easier, so that you don't feel like you're spending 2 hours on one job application. Because when you, like you said, we need to apply for so many different jobs, we don't have that kind of time to sit and tailor each individual resume every single time. So I give them tips and strategies on how to do that inside the membership, make it easier for them. You still have to tailor them and optimize them, but I can show you ways to do it, make it more organized so that it doesn't take you as much time.
It sounds like you're a very organized person.
Okay.
Which is great, because then you help others. And even, like, I know I feel like I'm a very organized person, but sometimes trying to figure out the best way to organize something is tricky. So if you've already done it for me and you're like, oh, just put the information in here, that's always, I like people who help me to stay organized. So I think it's probably a very, a wonderful thing that you have for them. Tell me about, I think you have like you give them a couple, like a week or so to try it out. Is that what you do with your jobs?
The free job board is open to anybody, so you can come on the webpage, but the jobs they are posted inside the membership first, and then on the 6th day, they'll go onto the free job board, so that you're getting the same user experience on the job board on the free version as you would in the premium membership, but you have some extra perks inside the membership with the jobs. There's like some quick search categories and the ability to set up personalized job alerts in the membership. So everyone has access to the free job board, but the jobs will roll on there on the 6th day for the nurses to see on the free job board.
Okay, so if you're in the membership, you get it as soon as it's up. And if you're not, then you get it 6 days. So where do people go to find this job board?
remotenurseconnection.com.
Well, that made it easy. remotenurseconnection.com. And we will have that link in the show notes. Is there any other tips or advice that you have for nurses that are looking for a remote job so that they can make it a little easier for them, not get scammed?
They can join the Facebook group, Remote Nurse Connection and Jobs. So anytime there's nurses that come in there and ask, you know, does anyone work at this company? Does anyone have any feedback on this company? Getting firsthand experience from other nurses. You still have to do the same thing with the Facebook group, like you said, of vetting people who come in there. So I try my best to vet every single person, you know, coming in there, and anyone, if there are any jobs that get posted in there, they're approved, you know, by an admin first. So you can come in there and ask questions and get feedback from other nurses about companies and recruiters or anything like that, that's a good way to network with other people and reach out to other Facebook group, like your Facebook group too. Like, hey, has anyone worked at this company before? If you have any kind of like red flag feeling about it before you move forward with more information with them.
I love that. And I love that you have that Facebook group specifically for people to ask those questions. And I know people ask a lot in our groups too, but I love that you have that where people can go in there and feel comfortable knowing that you've actually screened the people that go in there. I want to commend you for it is a lot of work having a Facebook group and trying to weed out people because there are people who will make themselves look really good and then they get in there and they just spam.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, some that slip through with the AI now too. It's really hard. They can answer questions and stuff. So you kind of, I change up the questions a lot to try to, keep that where, so those do, slip through, everything slips through the cracks every once in a while. But and like you said, when you're on it and you're checking it and there's someone actually really running it, we do the best we can to.
Yeah. And I do want to say that there's a lot to be said for a well-run Facebook group. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of energy and you get you don't get anything for it. You're not getting reimbursed for the time and energy you put. So thank you, Andrea, for having that resource for nurses, a free resource for nurses, as well as your job boards. Very, very kind of you. And it seems like that's just who you are, a kind person who wants to help out nurses and make sure that they find good jobs.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we're going to wrap it up for today. I really appreciate all the tips that you've given us. I think with what you've given the nurses today, they should feel very secure in what they need to do to make sure that they are giving information to the right people and not getting scammed. So thank you for that. Any last minute advice or words? Or just show up at the remote nurse connection, right?
I'm very active on Instagrams and in the Facebook groups. And the Facebook group is probably the best place because that way I can see it. Instagram filters things a lot to the spam folder, but any questions, I'm always pretty responsive on social media if they want more feedback. Thanks.
Awesome. If you are looking for a remote job, make sure you check out Andrea's job board. It's a wonderful resource. Thank you again for spending some time with us. I'm sure everybody has gotten so much value out of this, and we really appreciate you. Thank you.